Hey everyone! Slipways was released last week, and so I thought I would do a tutorial on how I composed some of the music. When Jakub and I started collaborating, he mentioned that gameplay time was going to be 30 minutes average, so I knew we needed to fit lots of music into a single card and use Pico-8 in more unconventional ways to fit in all this music. So I'm going to just show some examples of how I did that. So the trick to squishing all of this music into a single cart was using a combination of very slow speeds and the instrument editor. I'll give a few examples. So here's the first pattern you hear in Slipways. Each XFX is running at speed 172. Here we go up here. So when you use really slow speeds, the length of each SFX can be 10 or 20 times longer than usual. And this is really important when you want to fit in a lot of music into a cart. The problem with using slow speeds, though, in Pico-8 is that you're very restricted in how you can articulate and express and create nuance with each row. So, for example, here's SFX 14. And if I wanted to recreate that using regular instruments, it would sound like this. So it sounds a little bit too square, and that slide is just way too slow to create the kind of momentum and movement that I wanted in the first part of the music. So this is where the instrument editor comes into play. So I created these instruments for the first half of the soundtrack. And now I can call all of these SFX at speed 172. And these sounds are much more expressive and versatile, and they create movement, and it's great for this kind of ambient texture. So here's an example. Another idea I used a lot in this soundtrack was composing musical phrases in the editor. For example, I used this phrase a lot throughout the soundtrack. And there are two things to take note of. The first is that it's very flexible harmonically. The notes G, C, and D can be used over many different bass notes to create different chords and different modes. And then when you use them in other SFX, you can combine them with other instruments and other effects to create phrases like this. Here's another one. The other thing to take note of in this SFX is the odd loop length. With the loop point at row 30, the beginning and the end of this phrase is ambiguous. And when you pair that with another phrase of a different loop length, you get a much, much longer phrase. So actually, just to demonstrate, what I'll do is I'm going to take out these instruments, and I'm going to go back to the instrument that I created, and I'm going to put the loop length at 32. So it will resolve kind of how you would expect. And it's going to reset here. Now when I put it back to 30, it no longer resets on the fifth row. Yeah, so these kinds of polymetric phrases are happening all over the soundtrack, and it's a great way to keep things from sounding too repetitive. Even here in SFX 11, in this accompanying part, this is a a loop of 9 rows. And I figured this out ahead of time, and that means that in relationship to everything else, this phrase doesn't resolve until row 18 down here. And even at row 18, it's still mid-phrase. So this pattern actually never fully resolves in relationship to everything else for this entire pattern. In pattern 16, you can better see these relationships play out. So in SFX 38 and SFX 39, they're both at speed 128, but they have different loop points. SFX 38, which is kind of playing a bass part, is looping at 14, and 39 is looping at 16. So when you put them together, every time they loop, they have a different relationship with each other. See, now you can see they're kind of out of sync, but still sounds pretty good. So this pattern is similar. We have 38 and 39, but now we have this melodic phrase on the third channel in SFX 28. And this has a loop point at 34. So the relationship to the other parts is even more complicated now. Yeah, so hopefully this gives you some insight into composing really long pieces in the restrictions of a Pico-8 cart. I think I mentioned, but overall the entire soundtrack ended up using all 8 instrument editors, 43 SFX, and is 17 minutes long with no loop points. But the only way I was able to do that was by using these slow speeds and using the instrument editor and composing musical phrases in the instrument editor. Hopefully that was insightful. Leave a comment below if you have any questions you'd like me to clarify anything, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.